So what if you could control $1 million with only 100,000? Sounds like a good deal, right? That's the basic idea behind something called leverage. It's a fancy word for a simple concept, using borrowed money to increase your financial power. It's about making your own money work harder, punch above its weight. You put in a little, you borrow a lot, suddenly you're playing in a much bigger league. This can be an incredible way to build wealth, turning small opportunities into massive wins. And this is a very big, but it works both ways. The same power that magnifies your gains can also amplify your losses into something truly catastrophic. Let's break it down with a simple example. Imagine you have $100 in your pocket. You decide to invest it in some stock. If that stock doubles in value, you now have $200. You made a $100 profit. Now let's bring in leverage. You still have your $100, but you borrow another $100 from a friend. You now have $200 to invest. The stock doubles. Your investment is now worth $400. You pay your friend back $100. You're left with $300. Your profit is $200, double what it was before. But what happens when things go wrong? Rewind. You invest $100 without borrowing. The stock price is cut in half. Your investment is now worth $50. You've lost $50. Now, the leveraged scenario. Your 100 plus 100 borrowed, 200 invested. The stock collapses by half. Your investment is now worth $100. You still owe your friend $100. You sell, repay the loan, and you're left with zero. You've been wiped out. This is the central paradox of leverage. It's a tool, not a magic trick. It doesn't create value out of thin air. It stretches what you already have. It can stretch towards incredible success or stretch until it snaps, leaving you with nothing. The difference often comes down to knowledge, timing, and a healthy dose of caution. Understanding this dual nature is the first step to using debt in a way that works for you. Be smart, be strategic. Don't just roll the dice. Know you've been a good friend. Let's move this out of simple numbers and into the real world. Now think about buying a home, which for most people is the biggest financial decision they'll ever make. Well, imagine a young professional who wants to buy an apartment in the beautiful port city of Marseille. The apartment she has her eye on costs 300,000 euros. She has worked hard and saved up a down payment of 60,000 euros. That's a lot of money, but it's not enough to buy the property outright. So she goes to a bank and borrows the remaining 240,000 euros. In that moment, she has just used leverage. With her 60,000 euros, she is now controlling a 300,000 euro asset. Now, let's say the property market in Marseille has a good year, maybe a new tech hub opens up nearby, or the city becomes an even more popular tourist destination. The value of her apartment rises by 10%. The property is now worth 330,000 euros. That's a 30,000 euro increase in value. Since she only put in 60,000 euros of her own money, that 30,000 euro profit represents a massive 50% return on her initial investment. A modest 10% rise in the asset's price translated into a huge gain for her personally. This is why people get so excited about real estate. Leverage allows them to benefit from the full value of the property, not just the portion they paid for in cash. But what if the market goes the other way? So let's imagine a local industry closes down, or France enters a recession. The property market in Marseille cools off, and the value of her apartment drops by 10%. The 300,000 euro property is now worth only 270,000 euros. She has lost 30,000 euros in equity. That loss represents 50% of her original 60,000 euro investment. And here's the tough part: she still owes the bank the full 240,000 euros. Actually, the debt didn't shrink just because the apartment's value did. Suddenly, her financial situation is much more precarious. The same force that promised huge gains has delivered a devastating blow. And this example shows the raw power of leverage in a tangible way. It's not just about stocks and shares. It's about homes, dreams, and financial security. The dream is that the value of the asset will grow faster than the cost of the debt. For many homeowners, this gamble pays off over the long term, but it's never a guarantee. The market can be unpredictable, and a downturn can put even the most careful borrower in a very tight spot. It's not just individuals who use leverage. Companies and massive financial institutions are some of the biggest players in the game. Let's consider a small French tech startup, maybe based in Aix-Marseille. The founders have poured their life savings into it, giving them 500,000 euros in equity. They have a brilliant product, but to scale up production and marketing, they need more cash. So they go to a venture capital firm or a bank and secure a loan for 1 million euros. The company now has a total of 1,500,000 euros in capital to work with. They are leveraging their equity to get the funds they need to grow. If their business plan is a success, this borrowed money can create incredible returns. That 1 million euros might allow them to enter new markets, hire top engineers, build a brand that dominates their niche. The profits generated from this expansion could far exceed the cost of the loan, leading to a huge increase in the company's value. The original 500,000 euros in equity could become worth millions. This is the classic story of entrepreneurial success, often fueled by a healthy dose of debt. Without leverage, many businesses would simply never get off the ground or would grow at a snail's pace. Now let's look at the other side of that coin. Imagine the startup's expansion doesn't go as planned. Perhaps a competitor launches a better product, or the market for their gadget suddenly dries up. The company is now burning through cash and isn't generating the revenue it projected. The problem is that 1 million euro loan doesn't go away. The interest payments are still due every month. As the company's cash reserves dwindle, the weight of that debt becomes heavier and heavier. If they can't turn things around, the debt that was supposed to fuel their growth could be the very thing that pushes them into bankruptcy. This dynamic gets even more extreme when you look at institutions like hedge funds. A hedge fund might take 1 million euros of its investors' money and borrow an additional 2 million euros, allowing it to invest a total of 3 million euros. If the market goes up 10%, they make a 300,000 euro profit on a 1 million euro base, a 30% return. But if the market drops suddenly, they face what's known as a margin call. The lender gets nervous and demands that the fund either put up more cash or sell some of its assets to reduce the loan. Being forced to sell into a falling market is a recipe for disaster, locking in losses and potentially triggering a downward spiral of more selling and more margin calls. When we talk about debt, we usually focus on the cost, the interest payments, but smart borrowers know leverage can come with certain advantages or discounts that make it an attractive tool. These aren't discounts in the sense of a sale at a store, but rather built-in features of the financial system that can lower the true cost of borrowing. The most obvious one is a low interest rate environment. If you can borrow at, say, 3% and invest in an asset expected to return 10% a year, that 7% difference is your profit. This is called arbitrage, and it's a powerful incentive to use borrowed money. Another significant discount comes from the tax code. In many countries, the interest paid on certain types of loans is tax deductible. For a business, the interest it pays on a loan to expand its operations is treated as a business expense, which reduces its taxable income. This means the government is effectively subsidizing a portion of the loan. For individuals, the interest on a home mortgage is often deductible as well. This tax shield now lowers the real after-tax cost of borrowing, making the prospect of taking on debt for a home or a business even more appealing. It's a deliberate policy choice designed to encourage investment. Leverage also provides a crucial discount in the form of access. Think back to our Marseille apartment buyer. Without a mortgage, she would have to save for decades to afford a 300,000 euro home. Leverage gives her access to that asset today. It allows her to start building equity and living in her own home far sooner than she could otherwise. For a business, a loan provides access to the capital needed for large-scale projects. Building a factory, developing new technology, acquiring a competitor, these are opportunities that would be out of reach for companies relying solely on their own cash reserves. In this sense, debt is a key, that unlocks a door to bigger possibilities. But it's essential to remember that these discounts are not free passes. They are part of a complex equation of risk and reward. A low interest rate today is no guarantee of a low rate tomorrow, especially with variable rate loans. Tax laws can change, potentially removing the deductions that made a loan seem so attractive, and the access that leverage provides is access to both the upside and the downside of a large asset. These benefits make debt a powerful tool for wealth creation, but they don't eliminate the underlying risks. They simply make the gamble more tempting, The principles of leverage don't just apply to individuals and companies, they can shape the destiny of entire nations. When we zoom out and look at the big picture, we can see how massive amounts of debt can fuel incredible growth, but also create systemic risks that threaten the whole world. A prime contemporary example is China's corporate debt situation. For years, China powered astonishing growth by encouraging heavy corporate borrowing to build skyscrapers, high-speed railways, massive factories. By some estimates, corporate debt in China has climbed to over 160% of GDP, more than double the level in the United States. This massive leverage has worked in a way. It turned China into the world's factory and lifted hundreds of millions out of poverty. The borrowed money created jobs, built modern infrastructure, and propelled the economy forward at a breathtaking pace. But the high debt model makes the system incredibly fragile. Many companies now carry enormous loans they can only repay if growth stays rapid and demand stays high. If growth slows or prices fall, many firms could be unable to make loan payments. That's where contagion risk appears. If many companies default at once, banks will face catastrophic losses. A banking crisis could follow, forcing banks to stop lending. That credit freeze can bring an economy to a screeching halt. Because China is deeply integrated into global trade and finance, a major slowdown wouldn't stay inside its borders. It would send shockwaves worldwide, impacting supply chains, financial markets, economies from Asia to Europe to the Americas. This shows leverage can be a powerful but dangerous engine for national development. A country can borrow its way to prosperity for a while, but eventually the bill comes due. Policymakers must manage a soft landing to reduce reliance on debt without causing collapse. It's a delicate global balancing act with consequences for billions. The story of China's corporate debt is a live action lesson in the monumental risks that come with nationwide leverage. If we need any reminder, we only need to look back at recent history. The 2008 global financial crisis is a textbook case of leverage running wild. It all started with the US housing market. For years, it seemed like house prices could only go up. This belief it encouraged everyone to take on more debt. Individuals took out mortgages with little or no money down. Banks bundled these mortgages together and sold them to investors around the world. Financial institutions used immense leverage to buy these securities, betting that the housing market would never fall. Then the unthinkable happened. The US house prices began to decline. Suddenly, millions of homeowners found themselves underwater, owing more than their homes were worth. Many defaulted on their loans. This caused mortgage-backed securities to plummet in value. These securities were held by banks and by investment funds globally. Because these institutions were so highly leveraged, even a small drop wiped out their capital. Giants of Wall Street like Lehman Brothers went bankrupt. The entire global financial system froze, leading to the worst recession since the Great Depression. A few years later, a different kind of debt crisis erupted in Europe, centered on Greece. For years, the Greek government had borrowed enormous sums to fund public spending, running up a national debt far exceeding the size of its economy. When the global recession hit, investors realized Greece might not be able to pay. They stopped lending, and a sovereign debt crisis was born. To avoid collapse, Greece accepted massive bailout loans that came with brutal austerity conditions, deep cuts to government spending, pensions, public sector salaries. These historical episodes serve as powerful warnings. The 2008 crisis shows how leverage in one sector, housing, can infect the entire system. It demonstrates the danger of complex financial products that hide true risk. The Greek crisis illustrates that entire countries are not immune to too much debt. When your creditors lose faith, they can cut you off, forcing painful choices that impact ordinary citizens for a generation. So, after all these stories of triumph and disaster, what is the core truth? The reality is that leverage is neither inherently good nor inherently bad. It is a tool, a powerful amplifier. It can amplify your intelligence, your strategy, your hard work into incredible success. It can also amplify your mistakes, your bad luck and your overconfidence into complete and utter ruin. The ultimate risk is bankruptcy. Individual with a credit card, company with a bank loan, country with sovereign bonds. If you cannot pay your debts, creditors can take everything. This is a fundamental rule of finance. Don't avoid debt entirely. Manage its risks with extreme care and respect. This begins with a simple set of rules. First, know the true cost of your debt. Understand the interest rate. Know if it's fixed or variable. Be aware of all the fees involved. Second, be brutally honest about volatility. How much could the asset's value fluctuate? Plan for the worst case, not just the best. Third, always maintain a buffer. Have cash reserves so you can keep making payments if income drops or investments sour. For businesses, stress test finances against drops in sales. For an investor, prepare for a margin call without being forced to sell. For nations, watch overall debt levels and keep growth sustainable. Build resilience so one unlucky break won't destroy you. Never borrow more than you can realistically repay. Avoid complex debt you don't fully understand. Leverage is a double-edged sword. One edge can carve a path to wealth and opportunity. The other can deliver a fatal blow. The difference is how you wield it. Use it with caution, preparation, and clear-eyed understanding of risks. Don't let quick, rich promises blind you to devastating losses. If you do this, leverage becomes a powerful ally. If you treat it like a toy, it will almost certainly break you. The wisest path is balance. Use debt to grow,